3 children, 15 years of marriage, and the DNA test said
It's a
0% match. Claire, a respected professional in her community, stood alone in her bedroom, hands trembling as she held the medical envelope. The stark white paper felt like it was burning between her fingers. 3 names, 3 children she had raised, loved, and cared for over the years. And none of them, absolutely none of them, shared the DNA of the man she'd married. How was this possible? How could a woman who had never cheated on her husband be holding a DNA report saying her 3 children were not his? The answer was buried in a secret she had kept for 15 years. A secret so heavy it had shaped every day of her married life. A secret that now, with this envelope in her hands, was about to blow her entire existence apart. But to understand how Chioma arrived at this impossible moment, we need to go back in time. Back to when everything seemed perfect. When her family was the shining example everyone admired. They married at a beautiful ceremony that brought together over 300 guests from across the country. He, a successful civil engineer working on major infrastructure projects. She, a dedicated primary school teacher with a smile that lit up any room. Together, they represented everything the modern middle class aspired to be. Educated, successful, and deeply respected in their community. In the first few years, the happiness was genuine. Amika came home every night at 7 sharp, always with a small gift for Chioma. Flowers, imported chocolate. Once, a silk scarf she wore every Sunday to church for a whole year. He called her my treasure, and she called him my king. Neighbors commented on the perfect couple living in the yellow house on Victoria Street. But there was something missing. Something that their society suggested every marriage needed. Children. 2 years passed. Then 3. Then 5. The spare bedroom that should have become a nursery remained empty. Family members started asking uncomfortable questions. Amika's mother visited with increasing frequency, her glances seeming to search for explanations. "Claire, are you eating properly?" she would ask, her voice soft but laden with concern that wasn't quite sympathy. "A woman needs to be strong to carry children. Are you managing the stress?" The pressure was relentless. In their community, childlessness wasn't just a personal matter. It was something everyone felt entitled to comment on. Infertility became a kind of social failure, and the blame inevitably fell on the woman. The statistics were grim, but the reality for Claire was personal. Every look from a stranger, every veiled question from family, every comment at church felt like a weight she couldn't set down. "Maybe it's her," the women at church whispered when she walked past. "Some women just can't." "Poor Emeka," others said with that false sympathy that cuts deeper than insults. "Such a good man, and she can't give him what he deserves." Claire endured it all with a carefully maintained composure. She smiled at church socials, greeted neighbors warmly, pretended the comments didn't wound her. But at night, alone in their bedroom while Emeka worked late, she would cry silently. Her prayers became desperate, almost frantic. "God, please. Just one child. Just one. I'll do anything. Anything." She didn't know, in that moment, how much those words would haunt her. By their 7th year of marriage, Emeka finally agreed to be tested. Claire had already been through a battery of tests. Ultrasounds, blood work, invasive procedures that left her feeling violated and exhausted. Everything came back normal. The consultants had assured her that medically speaking, she was perfectly fine. It could be stress, they'd suggested. "Just try to relax. It'll happen when you least expect it." But it didn't. When Emeka booked his appointment with a specialist, Claire felt a flutter of hope. Finally, perhaps they'd get to the bottom of it. Perhaps the problem wasn't her, after all. 3 weeks later, they sat in the consultant's office together. "Mr. Emeka," the doctor said, setting down his notes with care, "I've reviewed your results thoroughly." The air in the small room seemed to still. "You have a condition called azoospermia. Essentially, your body produces no viable sperm. From a medical standpoint, you're infertile. And that means, naturally speaking, conceiving a child will be impossible." The world stopped. Emeka sat motionless, his face transforming from confusion to shock, then to something darker: shame, anger, denial. "This is a mistake," he said, his voice low and tense. "Run the test again." They did, twice more. The result was the same. But here was the problem. Emeka never told anyone. Not his family, not his friends, not even his mother, who kept blaming Chioma for his sterility. He guarded the diagnosis like a shameful secret, a hidden wound to his male ego. And Chioma? She remained the culprit in everyone's eyes. The weight of community shame, the social stigma, the healing prayers from the church women, it all still fell on her shoulders. But something changed in her. Where once there was passive acceptance, now desperation grew. She was 32. Her biological window was closing. Her social standing was disintegrating. Her marriage, though loving on the surface, was starting to crack under the pressure. It was during this period of maximum vulnerability that Reverend David entered her life. David led the Church of Divine Blessing, a thriving modern congregation known for attracting young professionals with its blend of contemporary theology and promises of answered prayers. He was 45, with the kind of charisma that made people believe he genuinely cared about their problems. He was particularly renowned for his fertility counseling sessions. Several women in the congregation had spoken openly about conceiving after his specialized ministry. Claire began attending his private sessions. "These work best when they're confidential," he'd explained. "That way, you can be completely honest with God." One Thursday evening, in his office surrounded by motivational quotes and soft lighting, Claire finally let herself break down. "David, I can't do this anymore," she sobbed. "My husband can't. I mean, the issue is with him. But no one can know. He's ashamed. And meanwhile, everyone's blaming me. People at church treat me like I'm somehow defective. I just want a child, one child, to prove I'm not broken." Reverend David listened, his hands covering hers, his expression radiating a sympathy that seemed entirely genuine. "Claire," he said gently, his voice intimate and warm, "I've been praying about your situation. I believe God has shown me something." Claire looked up through her tears, desperate for hope. "There's a way forward," he continued carefully. "It's actually quite biblical. You know the stories, don't you? Sarah and Abraham, Rachel and Jacob. When God closes one door naturally, sometimes he opens another through unconventional means." Over the coming weeks, what developed was manipulation wrapped in the language of faith. David quoted scripture. He spoke about surrogacy in biblical times, about how God worked through different people to accomplish his will, and slowly, deliberately, he introduced an idea into Claire's desperate mind, that he himself could serve as the instrument through which her prayers would be answered. "It wouldn't be unfaithful," he said during their increasingly intimate sessions. "It would be obedience, a holy service to God's purpose, the answer to your prayers." Claire was completely torn. Her faith was being weaponized against her doubt. Her shame was being dressed up as spiritual calling. Everything felt impossible and inevitable at once. She loved her husband, but she was suffocating under the weight of judgment and expectation. Part of her knew what David was suggesting was fundamentally wrong, yet he wrapped it so skillfully in theological language that her sense of right and wrong began to blur. "Think about Emeka," David said. "He'll never have a biological child. His sense of legacy is already destroyed. But if you do this, you'd be giving him the most precious gift. Children he could call his own, a family restored, his dignity returned, and Emeka would never need to know the details." 3 months after those counseling sessions, Claire was pregnant. Emeka's reaction was overwhelming. He actually wept with joy. He laughed. He picked Claire up and swung her around their living room. He called his mother immediately, who arrived within hours with friends from church, all celebrating, all praising God. They converted the spare bedroom into a nursery that very week. "God's answered our prayers," Emeka announced to anyone who would listen. "Everyone said it was impossible, but God proved them wrong." Claire smiled and accepted the congratulations. But something inside her had fractured. She had crossed a boundary she'd never thought she would cross. And now she carried not just a pregnancy, but a secret that would become the foundation of a prison she'd live in for years. Over the next 15 years, David fathered 3 more children with Claire. Each pregnancy meticulously planned in private counseling sessions. Each child welcomed into the world while Emeka believed he was experiencing God's miraculous intervention. The children grew up. Emma, the eldest, was now a teenager at private school with dreams of becoming a doctor. Thomas, the middle child, had a real talent for football. And Sophie, the youngest, loved dancing. They were bright, happy, thriving children. Emeka was completely devoted to them, working long hours to afford good schools, nice clothes, tutoring lessons. And throughout all of it, Claire lived with the unbearable weight of carrying that secret alone. But secrets have a way of breaking free. And it happened in a way Claire never saw coming. Emma, at 15, began experiencing troubling health issues, persistent exhaustion, joint pain that wouldn't go away. After months of different doctor visits, specialists suspected a rare genetic condition. They needed comprehensive genetic testing and family history. "We need to test both parents and any siblings," the consultant explained. "The genetic profile will help us identify the specific mutation and develop the right treatment." Emeka didn't hesitate. Whatever we need to do for her. And so, with no idea what they were about to trigger, the whole family underwent genetic testing. 2 weeks later, Claire got a call from the clinic. There were some unexpected findings in the results, and they wanted her to collect the report in person. She opened the envelope in her car, parked away from the main hospital entrance, and her hands began to shake. Paternity analysis. Emma, paternity excluded. Probability, 0%. Thomas, paternity excluded. Probability, 0%. Sophie, paternity excluded. Probability, 0%. 3 children, 15 years together. 0% match. Now, alone in her room with the envelope that would destroy her family, Claire faced an impossible choice. Telling Emeka would mean shattering the man she cared for. It would mean revealing that Reverend David, a man Emeka respected, had manipulated his wife. It would mean admitting that the children he'd raised and loved weren't biologically his. The devastation would be total. But hiding the report meant perpetuating a lie. And with Emma's health crisis unfolding, hiding it could cost her daughter the medical information she needed. The doctors required accurate genetic data. Data that Emeka couldn't provide because he wasn't actually their biological father. Her hands trembled as she stared at the envelope. 15 years of secrets. 15 years of shame. 15 years of pretending miracles had happened when, in reality, she had been manipulated by a religious predator. How had she gotten here? How had a choice made in desperation become this endless nightmare? And now, what would she do? She heard the front door open. Emeka's voice carried down the hallway, bright and animated. "Claire, love, I'm home. You'll never guess, I got a bonus today. Come on, we're going out for a proper family dinner. Where are you?" Her heart was pounding. She quickly buried the envelope at the bottom of her bag, ran her fingers through her hair, and dried her eyes. "Just coming," she called back, forcing brightness into her voice. Emeka appeared at the bedroom door, his face lit up with genuine happiness. He'd put on his good suit, the one he wore for important occasions. In his arms, a bouquet of red roses. "For the strongest woman I know," he said, offering her the flowers with that boyish smile that had attracted her all those years ago. 15 years, 3 incredible kids, and I swear I'm even more in love now than I was on our first day. Claire accepted the roses, and their fragrance made her feel physically ill. The sweetness was suffocating. She looked at the man she loved more than anything. The man who'd adopted those 3 children as his own. The man who'd worked himself ragged to give them every advantage. And she thought of the envelope tucked away, of the report that made everything a lie, of the reality that would tear everything apart if she spoke it aloud. "Emeka," she started, her voice barely audible. He waited, still smiling, completely oblivious to what was coming. Claire opened her mouth, closed it. The truth felt like a weight pressing down on her chest. "Say it. Don't say it. Say it. Don't say it." "Yes, love?" he prompted, that warm, trusting smile never wavering. And in that moment, holding the roses and feeling the envelope in her bag like a time bomb, Claire made a decision. Over the next 48 hours, she became someone playing a part. She made breakfast with shaking hands. She served dinner while her smile never quite reached her eyes. She helped Sophie with maths homework, but her mind was elsewhere. At church on Sunday, she sat between Amika and the children, but her voice sounded hollow. She could feel the DNA results repeating in her mind like a loop. Probability of paternity, 0%. The words felt like they were burning through her. Amika saw through the act. He always did. "You've been off lately," he said on Tuesday evening. There was genuine concern in his voice. "Has something happened at work? Is everything okay?" Claire stared at the water running over the dishes. "Just worn out, I think. The job's been demanding." "Are you certain? You've hardly looked at me in days." "Yes." The lie sounded brittle, sharper than she intended. Amika placed his hand on her shoulder, gentle but firm. "You know you can tell me anything, don't you? Anything." The irony was almost laughable. Instead, she forced herself to give him a quick kiss. "I know. I just need some rest." But it wouldn't get better. That night, Claire couldn't sleep past 3 in the morning. Amika slept peacefully beside her, blissfully unaware his entire life was about to be dismantled. She stared up at the ceiling in the darkness, the secret pressing down on her like a physical weight. How could she even say it? "Amika, you remember when we couldn't conceive? Well, it turned out the problem was you. So I went to Reverend David, and he offered a solution. The kids are genetically his." Impossible. Just forming the words in her mind felt obscene. Wednesday morning arrived like any other day. Amika woke early, showered, kissed her, and the kids goodbye. "I've forgotten my wallet," he called from the hallway. "Did I leave it in your bag? I think I borrowed it yesterday at the petrol station." Claire froze in the kitchen, a spoon suspended above the bowl. "My bag?" "Yeah, that's all right, isn't it?" She could hear him from the bedroom. Everything seemed to slow down. Her hands moved, but it felt like she was moving through treacle. She made it to the bedroom just as Amika was picking up the white envelope with the lab's logo. "What's this?" His tone was casual, just curious. He didn't understand yet what he was looking at. "Amika, please don't." But he was already tearing it open. His eyes moved across the first page, then the second. Claire watched the exact instant when the meaning of the numbers became clear to him. It was like watching a house collapse in slow motion. First came confusion. His eyes narrowed. "Paternity test. Why would you get a—" He looked at her, waiting for a reasonable explanation. Then denial. He flipped back through the pages, his head shaking. "No, this can't be right. There's been a mistake. The lab's made an error." Then came the shock. His hands began shaking. The paper trembled in his grip. "Claire, what the hell is this?" And then anger, the kind that changes a person's face entirely. When he looked up at her, he was someone else. The man she loved was gone, replaced by someone betrayed and furious. "Tell me what this is!" His voice exploded with a violence that made her flinch. "Amika, I can explain." "Explain?" He hurled the papers across the room. "Explain how my children aren't actually my children? Explain why you got a secret paternity test?" The children had appeared in the doorway, scared. Emma was holding Thomas's hand, her eyes wide. "Dad? Mom? Go back upstairs, now!" Amika's shout echoed through the house. He'd never spoken to them that way before. Never. Claire rushed to usher them out, saying soothing things that rang hollow even to her own ears. "It's all right. Your father's just upset. Back to bed with you now." When she returned, Amika was perched on the edge of the mattress, his head in his hands. His whole body was trembling. "How long have you known?" His voice was raw, almost destroyed. "How long have you known this?" Claire closed the door quietly. Her legs could barely hold her up. "About a week." "A week." He said the words slowly, as though testing their meaning. "You've known for a week and said nothing." I didn't know what to say. "How on earth did we end up here, Claire?" He looked up, and tears were streaming down his face. Amika, who never cried, who prided himself on staying strong, was falling apart right in front of her. "Did you have an affair?" Not like that." Then what do you mean? He stood up abruptly. These results here say I'm not their father. 0%. How else does that happen without… Claire felt her own tears coming. You want the real story? The whole thing? Yes. I think I deserve that. She took a breath. Once she said this, there was no taking it back. Do you remember all those doctor's appointments? 5 years of trying, every month thinking maybe this would be it, and then finding out it wasn't. The pressure from both our families. Your mom suggesting maybe you should take a second wife, that I was the problem. I never wanted… I know you didn't want that. But I could see it in your face sometimes, looking at families with kids, watching your cousins with their babies, that longing. And I thought it was my fault. I was breaking you. But it wasn't. His voice grew quieter, more confused. The doctors said there were issues on both sides. But I didn't know that then. All I knew was that I couldn't give you the one thing you wanted most. Emeka dragged his hands across his face. Go on. I went to talk to Reverend David for counseling. He said he could help, that he knew a way. Horror flickered across Emeka's face. No, please. He said there was a medical procedure, artificial insemination. Lots of couples do it. He said it wasn't infidelity, it was a medical solution. God's work, really. The Reverend. Emeka's voice climbed. David did this? He said it would be an anonymous donor, that no one would ever find out. But he was the donor. Emeka's voice broke. Oh God, he was the donor. Our kids are his. I thought I was saving us. I thought I was giving you the family you deserved. The family I deserved? He pressed his hand against his chest. I deserved honesty. I deserved a wife who talked to me, who made choices together with me. You seemed so desperate. So that justified doing it behind my back. He began pacing. Christ, Claire. Every memory feels tainted now. Emma's first time smiling. Thomas taking his first steps. All of it. Was it all a lie? It wasn't a lie. You're their father. You've raised them. You love them. But I'm not their biological father. His fist hit the wall hard. Do you grasp what that means? How that destroys me? The silence felt suffocating. Claire watched him fall apart, not just from betrayal, but something much deeper, something fundamental in how he saw himself. My family will destroy me for this, he said quietly, his voice hollow. They'll say I raised another man's children, that I'm less of a man because of it. They don't need to know. I know. He spun around, his voice raw. And knowing changes everything. Every time I look at them now, I'll see him. I'll see my own failure. Emeka, they care about you. Do they even know? The question cut like a knife. Do they know their dad isn't actually their dad? Claire shook her head, tears on her face. No, they don't. Should we tell them? The question hung in the air. Claire thought of Emma processing that information, Thomas feeling betrayed, Sophie not quite understanding but sensing something was terribly wrong. They're children, she said quietly. They're innocent. We can't destroy what they believe about their lives. But how is it right to keep lying? More lies on top of everything else. I don't know, Claire sobbed. I just know they don't deserve to pay for what I did. Emeka turned to the window. Outside, the world carried on normally. No one knew that in this house. Everything was coming apart. This Reverend, he said, his voice carefully controlled. David. Does he know who they are? He knows he provided the genetic material. He wasn't anonymous about it. He knew they would be our children. Our children. Emeka laughed bitterly, a sound without any humor. His children. With me left here paying the bills and playing the father figure. That's not what this is. Did he ever approach you after? Emeka turned sharply. After they were born, was there anything more than just that one thing? Claire sensed the fear beneath the question. The terror that this wasn't just some cold transaction, that something deeper had happened. No, nothing. It was clinical, medical. That's all. And I'm supposed to take your word for that? His voice was soaked in bitterness. Why should I believe anything you tell me at this point? Claire had nothing to say to that. Emeka grabbed his jacket from the back of the chair. I need to get out of here. Emeka, wait. No. He held up his hand. I can't talk to you right now. If I do, I'll say things I can't take back. Where are you going? He paused at the door. To deal with things I should have dealt with a very long time ago. When the door clicked shut, Claire sank to the floor. Her sobs came from somewhere deep, somewhere primal. Her body shook as she struggled for breath. Small footsteps. Sophie appeared in the doorway, concern written all over her face. Mummy? Why are you crying? Why did Dad leave like that? Claire pulled her daughter into her arms, holding her as tightly as she could. It's fine, sweetheart. Mum and Dad just had a row. Are you getting divorced? Sophie's voice was small, terrified. No, love. Never, Claire said, though she wasn't sure if that was true. Your dad just needs to get some air. But she knew better. Emeka hadn't left to think. He'd left to confront, because Claire had just thought of something terrifying. Looking back, she'd never asked herself why David had volunteered so readily, why he'd insisted on being the donor himself when there were proper clinics for this sort of thing, why he stayed in constant contact with the family, always finding reasons to visit, always present. And now, with Emeka on his way to confront him, worse questions emerged. Questions that frightened her. How many other desperate women had David manipulated like this? How many other men were raising children they thought were theirs? And what would a man like Emeka, furious, humiliated, shattered, do when he discovered how widespread this was? Claire held Sophie closer, the weight of what she'd set in motion pressing down on her. She'd thought she was helping, saving them. Instead, she'd only hastened the destruction. Somewhere across the city, Emeka was about to discover that their private nightmare was actually part of a much larger pattern. Emeka pulled up outside the church, his hands gripping the wheel so hard his knuckles had turned white. He'd run through this conversation in his head 100 times on the drive. But now, sitting here looking at the building with its spire and stained glass, he felt something he hadn't expected. Pure fear. Not of David himself, but fear of what he was about to confirm. The office was on the second floor. Emeka had actually funded that renovation 3 years back. The bitter irony, he'd paid to renovate the very place where his life would fall apart. The secretary at the desk tried to intercept him. The Reverend is in prayer right now. I'm afraid. Emeka walked straight past her and pushed the door open. Hard enough that the crucifix on the wall rattled. David was sitting at his desk, reading through some papers. He glanced up, unhurried, unsurprised, completely composed. Almost serene. Emeka, I rather thought you'd come. That caught him off guard. You expected me? Of course. Claire rang me yesterday, quite distressed. She said you'd discovered the artificial insemination. The clinical phrasing was obscene. He made it sound like a medical procedure, not the annihilation of a family. Artificial insemination? The rage in Emeka's chest felt like it might burn through his ribs. You lied to us! David didn't even flinch. I provided a solution to a couple in desperate need. You got my wife pregnant with your child without my knowledge or consent. Because you asked me to. His voice took on an air of authority. Don't you remember, years ago? Claire, tearful, you both on your knees begging me to help? Reverend, please, we'll do whatever it takes. Emeka did remember that desperation, but that wasn't. You manipulated what we said. When we said we'd do anything, that didn't mean... Didn't it? David rose to his feet, suddenly towering. What exactly did you mean then? You wanted a miracle, but only on your terms? You wanted children, but only if you could control how God provided them? It was brilliant manipulation. For a moment, it almost persuaded him. God had nothing to do with this. You did it. You crossed every boundary. Your wife signed something. He slid a folder across the desk. Informed consent. She understood perfectly what she was signing. Emeka's hands shook as he opened it. There it was. Claire's signature. Dated 6 years prior. A consent form describing artificial insemination with an anonymous donor. She didn't tell me. Because I suggested she shouldn't. Some blessings work better when people don't scrutinize them. If you'd known from the beginning, your skepticism could have spoiled it. But now, you have 3 wonderful children. Why ruin that over a technicality? A technicality, as though biological paternity were a minor detail. Something shifted in Emeka. He'd come seeking explanations, maybe an apology. Instead, he was looking at something far more sinister. A manipulator who didn't see anything wrong with what he'd done. You feel no guilt about any of this. Guilt? For bestowing the gift of life? For carrying out my calling? Your calling was to provide spiritual guidance, not to make yourself into God. David's smile slipped. I'd watch what you say. Or what? You'll ban me from the church. David stood, something cold entering his gaze. I won't need to do anything. You'll go home, hug those children, and thank God you have them. Because the alternative... A meaningful pause. The alternative is destruction. For what? To make a point? The trap had snapped shut. He was reversing the blame, making Emeka the unreasonable one. But Emeka had done his homework. I'm not the first, am I? A flicker of alarm crossed David's face before he masked it. Rebecca Harris, 3 years ago. She and her husband came to you, desperate. She conceived after your special sessions. Silence. And then there's the Patel couple, the Smiths, Margaret. Emeka brought out his phone. At least 4 families, David. All the same story, all the same solution you offered. He'd spent the previous night searching online forums, infertility support groups, social media comments from church members. The pattern was unmistakable. Women calling them unexplained miracles. Couples finally conceiving after years of trying, always with odd gratitude toward David. Always strangely evasive about the medical details. You're making connections that aren't there, David said, his smooth tone fraying. Rebecca wants to come forward. She contacted me. She's finished keeping silent. Others are too. Stop. His voice cracked like a whip. The composure slipped away entirely. You haven't thought about what will happen, so explain it to me. A bitter laugh. I've helped dozens of couples, Emeka. Saved marriages, given people hope. Yes, I used unconventional methods. But look at the results. Families that are happy. Children that are loved. Lives that have been transformed. Lives built on deception. Compassionate deception that prevented women from taking their own lives. He slammed his hand on the desk. Do you understand how many women have considered suicide because of infertility? The shame, the weight of it in their minds. I gave them an escape, a way to become mothers without the public humiliation. For a brief moment, Emeka almost saw the logic. Almost. So, you're a savior, a misunderstood hero. I am a man who made difficult choices for the greater good. No, you are a predator who exploited vulnerability. Silence as thick as concrete. This conversation is over. If you proceed with these fanciful accusations, you will find you have much more to lose than I do. Is that a threat? It's a fact. Do you think the congregation will believe you? A man who barely comes to church? Against me, a pastor who has served 20 years? He smiled. Besides, how will your children react when they find out their father wants to destroy everything out of wounded male pride? I'm taking this to the Council of Elders. The pastor laughed. Good luck. 2 hours later, Emeka discovered the meaning of that laugh. The council consisted of 7 men, all over 60, fiercely loyal to the pastor. Brother Matthew, the finance accountant. Brother Daniel, a shop owner. Brother Joseph, the lawyer. Respectable men, influential men, who stared at him with stony eyes. Very serious accusations, said Brother Matthew. I know. That's why I bring evidence. Evidence? Brother Daniel crossed his arms. I see speculation and internet gossip. There is Ngozi Eze. She will testify that... Sister Ngozi is confused, interrupted Brother Joseph. She suffered a nervous breakdown after the birth. Any testimony would be questionable. Are you protecting him? We are protecting this church, Matthew corrected, from baseless scandals that would destroy decades of work. Good work? He deceived families, violated medical consent. He helped couples realize dreams, said Daniel. If the methods were unorthodox, sometimes God works in mysterious ways. Amika saw it in their faces. They knew something questionable was happening, and they chose to ignore it. Because the pastor was good for business. The church was growing. Donations were increasing. These men wouldn't let a scandal destroy their investment. So that's it? You're going to pretend nothing is wrong? Joseph leaned in. Let's forget this conversation. You go back home, hug your family. In exchange, we won't share your own indiscretions. What indiscretions? The affair 2 years ago, the woman in Abuja. The world tilted. He had an affair brief, forgotten, born of a marital crisis. Chioma never knew. He confessed to the pastor in secret. Pastoral trust. Sacred confidentiality. Now, a weapon against him. You can't. We can and we will. Joseph spread his hands. Your choice. Silence and peace, or exposure and destruction. Emeka left with trembling legs. He thought he was fighting a man, but he was fighting a system that protected interests at any cost. At home, almost midnight. Chioma awake, cold cup of tea in her hands, swollen eyes. They threatened you, she said. How? Because they threatened me too. The pastor called, said if I testify, he'll paint me as an adulteress who deceived her husband. But he has the document, which I signed under duress. Fire in her voice. He said it was the only way, that God demanded my faith, that if I told, the miracle wouldn't work. I was desperate, and he used that. Emeka looked at his wife, really looked, and saw another victim, manipulated just as much as him. What do? Chioma squared her shoulders. We fight. Together. Phone vibrated. Message from an unknown number. I'm Ngozi Eze. The pastor thought he silenced me. He was wrong. Can I meet you tomorrow? I have documents. I know other women who want to talk. For the first time in 2 days, Emeka felt something other than despair. He felt hope, but it would be destroyed in an unforeseen way. Upstairs, Adaze, 15 years old, was out of her room. She couldn't sleep with the noise-hushed arguments, door slamming when Dad arrived, electric tension filling the house. She went down to get water when she heard the voices. Pastor Obiora. Artificial insemination. Are not biologically yours. She froze on the last step. Her brain struggled to process. Not biologically yours. Whose? Dad's? She sat on the cold floor, hand over her mouth stifling sounds. She heard everything, every terrible word, every devastating revelation. Her father wasn't really her father. Her brothers weren't really her brothers. Her whole life was a lie. And she didn't know that this was just the first crack in a foundation about to collapse completely. The emotional explosion of the children in Adazi's room was not contained. The screams, the accusations, the crying. It all echoed through the house, piercing the walls that Chioma and Emeka had built with such care for years. There was no more delaying. There was no more protecting. Adaze came down the stairs like a storm. Her eyes, red from crying, now burned with crystalline anger. She found her parents in the living room, sitting side by side on the sofa, with that expression of someone who already knew this moment would come, but was never truly prepared. I want the truth, Adaze demanded, her voice belying her 17 years. All of it. No, you wouldn't understand. Or when you're older. Now. Chioma looked at Emeka. Emeka looked at Chioma. And in that 3-second silence, a tacit agreement formed. It was time. The other 3 children came down soon after. Chidi, 10, confused and frightened. Amara, 8, clutching her teddy bear. And Obioma, the youngest at 6, wide-eyed, trying to understand why everyone was crying. Emeka began to speak, but the words came out garbled, insufficient. How do you explain institutional betrayal to a 6-year-old? How do you translate spiritual manipulation into language that won't destroy their innocence? Chioma took over. Her voice trembled, but there was a new firmness there, something that hadn't existed before. Children. she began, looking at each of them. You know that Daddy and Mommy love you very much. All of you. But something happened before you were born. Something you need to know. Chidi interrupted immediately. Is it true that you cheated on Daddy with the pastor? The word cheated sounded brutal in a child's mouth. It's more complicated than that, Chioma replied, taking a deep breath. But yes, I was with Pastor Obiora, and yes, technically, Adaeze was born from that situation. But the full story, the complete truth, is much more than that sentence. Amara started to cry. Obioma asked, with the cruel honesty of small children. So we have different dads? Emeka leaned forward, resting his hands on his knees, as if the weight of this conversation was too physical to bear sitting normally. No, he said, with a conviction that surprised even himself. You have one father, me. Biology doesn't define family, love defines it. Presence defines it, and I chose to be a father to all of you. Adaeze let out a sound, half laugh, half sob. You chose? You chose? As if this was some noble favor? Adaeze, Chioma began. No. The teenager stood up. You don't understand. I spent my whole life thinking I had a normal family, and now I find out I'm the product of what? Of a scandal. Of a lie. Who am I anyway? It was Chioma who stood up this time, and for the first time in years, there was something beyond guilt in her eyes. There was clarity. You want to know who you are? Chioma asked, her voice gaining strength. You are Adaeze Okonkwo, daughter of Emeka Okonkwo and Chioma Okonkwo. You are a brilliant, courageous girl, with such a strong sense of justice that not even a fabricated DNA could deceive you. You are living proof that God can bring beauty out of chaos. That is who you are. The silence that followed was dense. The younger children looked between their parents and their older sister, trying to decipher if this was the end or the beginning of something. And then Chioma did something that changed everything. She sat on the floor, literally descended from the adult pedestal and sat on the living room rug at the children's height. I need to tell you a story, she said. My story. And you need to listen, because it's the only way to understand. And Chioma began to speak, not as a mother, not as a wife, but as Chioma, the woman who existed before all those titles. She spoke about 2010, about the pressure, about being married for 3 years with no sign of pregnancy, about the visits to clinics, the tests, the pitying looks from the nurses, about how, in their culture, a woman without children was considered incomplete, invisible, defective. You don't understand what that's like, Chioma said, looking specifically at Adaeze. To be treated as if you were less, as if your only purpose was to bear heirs and you were failing. She spoke about the aunts who whispered, about the mother-in-law who suggested Emeka look for alternatives, about how she started to believe there really was something wrong with her, and then she spoke about Pastor Obiora, not as a monster, not yet, but how he appeared, charismatic, attentive, with that smile that made you feel seen, special, chosen. He started by offering special prayer, Chioma recounted, her voice growing softer. Private sessions. He said God had revealed to him that my infertility was spiritual, that there were blockages only he could remove through deep ministration. Adaeze was listening now, truly listening, with an expression that slowly shifted from anger to something more complex. Horror, understanding, reluctant compassion. Chioma spoke about how the manipulation was gradual, how he mixed biblical verses with accidental touches, how the prayer sessions turned into intimate conversations, then secret meetings, and finally, into something she never imagined she would do. I'm not apologizing for what I did, Chioma said, and there was a new strength in that statement. Not completely, because I was a victim, but also. She paused, choosing her words carefully. I also made choices, wrong choices, and I carried the guilt of that alone for years. Emeka placed his hand on her shoulder. A simple gesture, but laden with meaning. When I became pregnant with you, Adaeze, Chioma continued, looking directly at her daughter, I thought it was a miracle. The pastor convinced me that God had worked through him. And I wanted so badly to believe it. I wanted so badly to be a mother that I didn't question. I didn't want to see. She spoke about the years that followed, how Emeka forgave her, even without knowing the full extent of the betrayal, how she conceived the other 3 children naturally, proving there had never been anything wrong with her, how she lived in silence, in guilt, in constant fear that the truth would come to light. And now, Chioma said, her voice finally cracking, now I found out I wasn't the only one, that he did this to other women, that Adaz isn't the only child born from this systematic manipulation. The children went quiet. Even Obioma, who usually couldn't sit still for more than 2 minutes, was completely motionless. It was Adaz who finally spoke, tears streaming down her face but with unexpected clarity. You were abused. Chioma blinked. That word, abused, was something she had never allowed herself to think. It had always been mistake, sin, weakness, but never abuse. Yes, she whispered. I think so. And in that moment, something shifted. Adazi's anger, so burning just minutes before, began to transform. It didn't disappear. It would be dishonest to say that. But it gained nuance. It gained context. I'm still angry, Adaz said, wiping her tears. But not at you, or not just at you. I'm angry at him. At the system that allowed this. At the people who should have protected you and didn't. Chidi, who had been quiet this whole time, finally spoke. So now what? What do we do? Emeka took a deep breath. Now we fight. Not just for our family, but for all the families he destroyed. Your mother is going to testify, publicly, and we're going to stand right beside her. Amara, always the practical one, asked, but if Mom tells everyone, will people say bad things about her? Yes, Chioma answered with brutal honesty. They will. Some people will call me an adulteress, a homewrecker, a liar, but others will understand. And more importantly, other victims will know they aren't alone. Obioma, with that surprising wisdom only small children seem to possess, said something no one expected. Secrets make us sick. My teacher said so at school. It's better to tell the truth and be a little sad than to keep a secret and be sick inside. The silence that followed was reverent. Somehow, a 6-year-old had captured the essence of everything they were facing. Chioma picked Obioma up and hugged him tight. You're right, my love. Secrets make us sick. And Mommy is tired of being sick. The conversation went on for hours. There were more tears, more questions, more moments of anger, and moments of tenderness. But in the end, when the kids finally went to sleep, there was something different in the air at the Okonkwo house. It wasn't peace. Calling it peace would be false. But it was truth. And truth, however painful, is always better than silence. In the days that followed, something remarkable happened. Chioma, who had spent years shrinking under the weight of guilt, began to unfold. She sought out Ngozi Uche, the first woman who had come forward with her story. They met at a discreet cafe, far from the prying eyes of the community. And there, sipping tea from cheap cups, 2 women who should never have met shared their wounds. I spent 12 years hating myself, Chioma confessed. Thinking I was weak, thinking I had betrayed my husband out of pure lust or ambition. Ngozi shook her head. I blamed myself too, for years. But you know what I realized? He was trained in this. This was a pattern. He knew exactly which women to look for. Desperate, vulnerable, socially pressured women. And he knew exactly what to say. How did you find the courage to speak up? Chioma asked, genuinely curious. Ngozi smiled sadly. My daughter asked me why I never speak about her father with affection, like other mothers do. And I realized my silence was shaping her self-image. She was starting to think there was something wrong with her just for existing. And in that moment, I decided my shame wasn't worth more than her dignity. Chioma felt something stir inside her. Something she hadn't felt in a long time. It wasn't exactly courage, not yet. But it was the seed of it. I want to testify, Chioma said, surprising even herself. I want to get up on that pulpit on Sunday and tell everything. Ngozi held her hand. Are you sure? Because once you speak, there's no turning back. People will judge. They will talk. They will invent versions of your story. I know, Chioma replied. But if I don't speak, other women will remain silent. Other girls will grow up thinking they are responsible for the manipulation they suffered. And I can't. I can't carry that. When Chioma told Emeka about her decision, he stayed silent for a long moment. I'm scared, he finally admitted. Not of you, but of what this will cost. You, the kids, us. I'm scared too, Chioma said. But you know what scares me more? The idea of Adaize growing up in a family built on lies. The idea that other women continue to suffer in silence while I hide behind respectability. Emeka pulled his wife into a hug. And for the first time in years, it wasn't a hug of comfort or forgiveness. It was a hug of partnership, of respect. Then we do this together, he said. And may God help us. That night, Chioma had a private talk with Adaize. Just the two of them, sitting on the edge of the teenager's bed, the soft light of the lamp creating a rare atmosphere of intimacy. I am so sorry, Chioma began, for all the confusion this has brought into your life. You didn't deserve to be born in the middle of all this mess. Adaize remained silent for a moment. Then she asked something Chioma wasn't expecting. Do you regret it, having me? The answer came without hesitation. Never. Not for a second. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. But I regret the circumstances. I regret the manipulation. I regret not having the courage to speak up sooner. I hate that my DNA comes from him, Adaize confessed, her voice cracking. I hate that when I look in the mirror, I might be seeing his features. Chioma cupped her daughter's face in her hands. Do you want to know what I see when I look at you? I see strength that I never had at your age. I see courage. I see someone who refuses to accept lies, even when the truth is painful. That didn't come from him. That came from you. That is all you. Adaize broke down in tears, and Chioma held her, letting the girl cry out everything she had been holding back for the last few days. All the confusion, all the anger, all the existential fear of a teenager discovering that her identity wasn't what she thought. I've decided, Chioma said when the tears finally subsided, that you're keeping the Okonkwo name, no matter what the DNA test says. Emeka is your father, in the only sense that really matters. Adaize nodded, but then asked, and the pastor? Is he going to know, that I exist? He always knew, Chioma replied, with a bitterness she couldn't completely hide. But he never wanted to know. And now he's going to have to face you. You and all the other children he helped create and then abandoned. There was something fierce in that promise. Something warrior-like. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, the investigation was gaining momentum. A third woman had come forward, then a fourth. Each testimony added another layer of evidence to the systematic pattern of abuse. The lawyers were documenting everything meticulously. Dates, locations, circumstances. The pattern was so consistent, it bordered on shocking married women, struggling with infertility, spiritually vulnerable, desperately looking for a solution that their faith promised, but that medicine couldn't deliver. And there, in the midst of that vulnerability, Pastor Obiora built his empire. Not of money, although there was plenty of money involved, but of control, of power, of a perverse satisfaction in molding other people's lives. Attorney Chukwuma called Emeka with an update. We have 4 solid testimonies now, he said, and DNA evidence from 3 children, including Adaize. The pattern is undeniable. But, Emeka pressed. But none of that matters if the women aren't willing to testify publicly. In court, yes, but the real battlefield here isn't legal. It's social. It's spiritual. We need to break the church's hold over these people. Chioma will testify, Emeka said, with a confidence he genuinely felt. On Sunday, during the service. There was silence on the other end of the line. Are you sure? That is a declaration of war. It's not a declaration, Emeka corrected. The war was already happening. We were just losing in silence. Now we're fighting back. On Saturday night, Chioma could barely sleep. She mentally rehearsed what she would say, imagined the reactions, prepared herself for the judgment, the rejection, for possibly being expelled from the community that had been her entire life. But she also prepared for something else, for the possibility of liberation, for the chance that her voice could create space for other voices, for the hope that her daughter could grow up in a world where victims didn't carry the shame of the perpetrators. Sunday morning arrived with a clear, bright sky, almost ironic in its beauty, considering the storm that was about to unfold. The Okonkwo family dressed in silence. Chioma chose a simple white dress, unadorned. There was something symbolic about its purity that wasn't performative, but honest. Emeka wore his best suit. Adaizi surprisingly asked to go too. "Are you sure?" Chioma asked, worried. "This is going to be difficult." "I need to be there," Adaizi replied, with a determination that reminded one so much of her mother and her father, her true father. "If you're going to speak for me, I need to be there, to show that I support you." When they arrived at the church, the parking lot was already full. It was a normal Sunday service, families arriving, greeting one another, children running around, the worship band doing their sound check. Everything absolutely normal, and about to never be the same again. Sunday morning. The church sanctuary was absolutely packed, easily 500 people. Plastic folding chairs crammed tightly together, and already the heat was intense at 9 o'clock. A ceiling fan turned slowly, barely moving the thick, warm air heavy with perfume and body heat. Reverend David stood on the platform in an impeccable white suit, microphone in one hand, his other arm raised skyward. His voice boomed through the speakers with the sort of charismatic authority he'd cultivated over more than 2 decades. "The enemy wants to destroy everything you've built," his voice thundered. "But we have already won through Christ." Amen. The congregation responded as one, some standing, hands lifted. Claire was sitting in the 5th row, precisely where Emeka had positioned her. Not too far forward to seem aggressive, nor too far back to be missed. Visible, deliberately placed. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. She clenched them, trying to steady herself. Beside her, Emeka sat rigidly, his gaze fixed on David on the platform. 3 rows ahead, Rebecca sat with her husband. 2 rows back, Jennifer. On the other side of the aisle, Margaret. Each of them knew what they needed to do when that moment came. "Today is a day for sharing testimonies," David announced, his tone shifting to that intimate, caring register he wielded so skillfully. "God wants your stories to strengthen this congregation. Does anyone want to share what's on their heart?" Claire's pulse was thundering so loud she was certain everyone could hear it. This was it, the point past which there was no turning back. She stood up. The room was packed, but suddenly it felt cavernous. 500 people. 500 pairs of eyes that would soon be looking straight at her. Her legs felt weak, her throat dry. "Yes, please." "Claire!" David called out, his voice warm and inviting. He had no inkling. "Come and tell us what God has shown you." Claire made her way to the front, each step seeming to take forever. The sound of her shoes on the floor was deafening. She could sense everyone looking at her. Curiosity, anticipation, some offering encouraging smiles. David handed her the microphone. Her hands were trembling visibly. He noticed, placed his hand on hers in a supportive gesture. That practiced, compassionate smile she'd come to recognize so well. His touch made her skin crawl. But she thought of Emma, of Thomas and Sophie growing up with this lie buried at the core of everything. She thought of the women scattered throughout this congregation, each carrying the same secret, the same shame. She began to speak. "My name is Claire." Her voice started softly but grew firmer. "And I'm here today to tell the truth. A truth I've kept hidden for years." The sanctuary became silent, that weighted quiet that precedes something significant. "My daughter Emma," she paused, breathing deeply, "is not biologically my husband's child." The room erupted in whispers. Shock, confusion rippled through. People leaned forward in their seats. David maintained his pastoral composure, but his eyes went hard. I understand marriage can be difficult, he began, his voice taking on that therapeutic tone. But this sanctuary isn't the place for... Reverend David is my daughter's biological father, Claire said, cutting through, her voice steady and clear now. The silence was complete, as though every breath had stopped at once. He approached me when I was at my most vulnerable, when our marriage was struggling. He told me it was spiritual counseling, that he was helping us, but it was deliberate manipulation. The congregation burst into chaos. Overlapping voices, people turning to their neighbors, others standing up. This is absolute nonsense. David's voice thundered through the speakers, suddenly harsh and raw. Gone was the pastoral gentleness. Claire, the enemy is clearly working through you. I have evidence, Claire said, producing an envelope from her bag. A DNA test, 99.9%. Reverend David is Emma's biological father. She held the document up where everyone could see it. Then Rebecca stood up. I'm Rebecca, she said, her voice cutting through the commotion. Everyone turned to look. And I have exactly the same story. The congregation went quiet again, that stunned silence of truth reshaping itself in real time. My daughter is 4 years old, Rebecca continued, walking down the aisle. Reverend David is her biological father. I have DNA results too, 99.9%. She raised her own envelope. No! David's wife screamed from the front, shooting to her feet. This is lies! These women are deluded. This is... Me too. Jennifer stood, her voice breaking but determined. My son is 3. David is his biological father, 99.9%. The sanctuary was coming apart at the seams. People standing, shouting, some trying to leave, others pushing forward to see. The deacons tried to restore order, but there was no order to restore. Me too. Blessing stood up, tears streaming down her face. My daughter Zara, 2 years old. Same story, same man, same manipulation. 99.9%. 4 women, 4 documents, 4 children, 1 man. The pattern was undeniable, visible, irrefutable. This is demonic, David cried, desperate now, his voice distorting through the speakers. The devil is using these women to destroy everything I've built. I founded this church. You founded it on lies, someone shouted from the middle, a man from the congregation. My sister went to him too, an elderly woman's voice from the side. The congregation was fracturing before their eyes. Some people were defending David, calling for forgiveness, insisting the church needed him. Others were horrified, betrayed, their faith disintegrating with each revelation. How many others are there? Someone yelled. How many more children? What happened to their money? Another voice demanded. Did he use church funds? The church's leaders were hurrying to the platform now, surrounding David. Some were trying to shield him, while others looked completely shocked, their allegiances torn between the man they'd known and the truth they couldn't deny. This is madness. One of the senior church leaders, Derek, grabbed a microphone. David has served this church faithfully for over 20 years. These women clearly... I need to speak too. The voice came from the back of the room. Young, male, steady. Everyone turned to look. A young man in his 20s wearing a church staff polo stood. Michael. He walked down the aisle deliberately, his face pale but resolute. My name is Michael, he said clearly. I've been an assistant here for 3 years, and everyone needs to hear this. The room was so still you could hear the ceiling fan. My mum died 2 years ago, Michael continued. Before she passed, she told me the truth about my father, a truth she kept hidden for 25 years. He paused in the center, facing David directly. David is my biological father, he said. Mum was part of this church back in 1999. She was 22, alone after a divorce, and he did to her exactly what he's done to these women. Michael held up an envelope, his hand steady. DNA test. I did it 6 months after Mum died, after I finally had the strength to know the truth. 99.9%. David is my biological father. The impact was immediate and profound. 25 years. This wasn't a recent slip-up. It wasn't a momentary lapse. This was a pattern, a practice. Years of systematic predation. How many? Michael's voice cracked. How many women across 25 years? How many children never knew the truth? How many families has he destroyed? David had stopped speaking. He just stood there on the platform, gray-faced, his eyes darting from person to person like a trapped animal. The authority he'd wielded so completely minutes before was crumbling in real time. "You don't understand," he finally said, his voice small and hollow. "The stress of this position. The temptations that come with power. I'm just a human being." "No." Amika stood, his voice cutting through any residual sympathy. "You are a predator. You exploited your position and your access to vulnerable women. This wasn't a moment of weakness. This was deliberate, systematic abuse." Sirens outside, the sound cut through the chaos of the sanctuary. Blue and red flashing through the windows. The double doors opened. 3 police officers entered, their presences cutting through the chaos like a knife. The officer leading, Inspector Adeyemi, walked directly down the center aisle, her eyes fixed on the stage. "Pastor Chukwudi Okafor," she said, her voice cutting formally through the sanctuary. "You are under investigation for multiple charges of sexual coercion, paternity fraud, and misappropriation of church funds. We need you to come with us for questioning." "No," the pastor's wife ran forward. "You can't do this. He is a man of God." "Madam, please step away," the inspector said firmly. She did not look at the wife. Her eyes remained on the pastor. Pastor Chukwudi descended from the stage slowly. His hands were trembling now. All that charismatic power evaporated, leaving only a middle-aged man shrinking under the weight of decades of collapsing lies. Inspector Adeyemi took his hands, bringing them behind him. The click of the handcuffs echoed through the silent sanctuary. There were no dramatic screams, there were no monologues, just the sound of metal clicking into place, the physical reality of justice. As the officers escorted him down the aisle, passing Chioma, passing Ngozi, Amara, Blessing, passing Junior, passing all the lives he had destroyed, the pastor kept his eyes down. Chioma watched him be taken away, and for the first time in 4 years, she felt no fear. She felt free. The sanctuary exploded again as the doors closed behind the police. But now it was different. It wasn't the chaos of denial. It was the chaos of processing, of reconciliation, of an entire community being forced to confront the reality that the man they had trusted, the man who had spiritually guided them for over 2 decades, had been a predator all along. Some were weeping, some screaming, some just sitting in shocked silence, staring blankly at the empty stage where their pastor had stood just moments before. The 4 women met in the central aisle. No words, just hugs. The physical solidarity of survivors who had finally been believed. Junior approached them, his eyes red. "Thank you," Chioma told him, her voice cracking, "for having courage." "My mother never had the courage while she was alive," he said softly. "The shame killed her as much as the cancer. But you had courage for all of us." Outside, through the windows, everyone could see the police car leaving. Pastor Chukwudi in the back seat, his head bowed, the handcuffs reflecting the morning light. The Church of Divine Light would never be the same again. But for the first time in decades, perhaps it could start to be honest. 3 months later, Nigeria was no longer the same. News of Pastor Adeyemi's conviction spread like wildfire across the savannah. 18 years in prison. Church assets confiscated to compensate the victims. The headlines were relentless. Fertility pastor convicted of DNA fraud, 12 women testify against religious leader, spiritual empire crumbles under weight of truth. In court, the evidence was irrefutable. The DNA tests, meticulously documented. The testimonies of the 12 women, each revealing the same terrible story. The promise of a miracle, the secret procedure, the devastating discovery years later. Chioma sat in the gallery every day of the trial, not for revenge, but to bear witness. For the first time in her life, her voice had been heard, and that voice had changed everything. When the sentence was read, she didn't cry. She simply held Emeka's hand and breathed, deeply, as if she were releasing years of imprisoned silence. Justice had been served. But it was only the beginning of true healing. In the Obiora household, the transformation was almost palpable. The walls no longer held secrets. Conversations were no longer rehearsed. For the first time in 15 years, that family breathed truth. Chioma watched a Daisy on the sofa, her 17-year-old daughter writing in her diary. The same girl who, 3 months ago, had screamed, "You ruined everything," was now processing the pain differently. Therapy had helped, but what had truly changed everything was her parents' brutal honesty. "Mom," Adazi said one evening, "can I read you something?" Chioma nodded, bracing herself. "I've learned that the truth doesn't destroy families. Lies do. The truth only reveals what has always been real. And what is real in our family is love. Not blood. Love." Chioma's eyes filled with tears, but they were different tears. Not of pain, of pride. The middle son had made a decision that surprised everyone. At 14, he asked to be legally adopted by Emeka. "Dad," he said, "you've always been my father. Now I want the paper to say what my heart has always known." Emeka, the man who had almost let anger destroy him, held his son and wept like never before. This was his boy. Biology had nothing to do with it. The youngest daughter, just 10 years old, had processed everything with a devastating simplicity. "So, Pastor Adeyemi is our biological father?" she asked one night at dinner. "Yes," Chioma replied, braced for any reaction. The girl thought for a moment. "That means he gave us genes, but Dad gave us everything else. It looks like Dad got the better deal." The room went silent, and then, for the first time in months, there was laughter. Genuine, liberating, cathartic. This 10-year-old child had summed up a truth that would take most adults years to understand. But the healing wasn't limited to the 4 walls of that house. For Chioma and Emeka's marriage, they decided to do something radical. A renewal of vows, but not a traditional ceremony. A public declaration of a fresh start. "I choose you," Emeka said, looking into Chioma's eyes. "Not because society says I should. Not because circumstances bind us. But because after seeing the worst of us, I still believe in the best of us." Chioma held his hands, her voice steady. "I promise you truth. Always. Because I've learned that a lie told to protect only destroys more slowly. And you deserve more than that." There was no applause, only silent witnesses to a love that had died and resurrected. Stronger, more real. In the church that had been the center of the scandal, another transformation was taking place. 40% of the members had left, unable to process the betrayal. But 60% stayed, not out of denial, but out of a determination to rebuild something better. The new pastor was a woman. That was no coincidence. The congregation had voted unanimously for female leadership, for transparency, for accountability. "We cannot erase what happened," she said in her first sermon, "but we can ensure it never happens again. And that starts with shared power, not concentrated power, with questions encouraged, not silenced." A support group for victims was formed, and what happened there was extraordinary. 23 women revealed similar experiences, not all with Pastor Adeyemi, but with other religious leaders, other men of power who had used God as an excuse for abuse. Chioma led these meetings. The victim had become the advocate, and her voice, once silenced, now echoed. "You are not alone," she said one of those nights, looking at faces marked by years of secret shame. "And your silence is not weakness, it is survival. But now we survive together, and together we change the system." The movement spread beyond that church, beyond that city. Pastor Obiora's son, Jr., now 32 and an established lawyer, made a radical decision. He used his influence to push for legislation regulating religious organizations. Churches cannot be states within states, he argued at a public hearing. If a doctor needs a license, if a lawyer needs supervision, why doesn't a religious leader with power over thousands of lives need accountability? The bill didn't pass. Not yet. But the conversation had begun. And in Nigeria, where religious power was almost absolute, that conversation was revolutionary. 6 months after the trial, the Obiora household had a new routine. Daisy had won a scholarship for law. Not by chance. She wanted to be a women's rights lawyer. Trauma had transformed into purpose. The middle son was following in Amika's footsteps in the construction business. Not because it was expected, but because he genuinely admired the man who had chosen to be his father. The youngest daughter had the lead role in the school play. A story about a family that discovers love isn't what binds you by blood, but by choice. When Chioma saw her on stage, delivering the final line, "We weren't born a family, we became a family," she realized the cycle had been broken. Her daughters wouldn't grow up in silence. They wouldn't accept blind authority. They wouldn't confuse control with love. That was the true victory. On a quiet afternoon, Chioma sat on the terrace with a cup of tea. Amika joined her, the silence between them now comfortable rather than tense. "You know what I realized?" she said, looking at the sunset. "For years, I thought protecting the family meant keeping secrets, that love meant silent sacrifice. And now?" asked Amika. "Now I know that protecting the family means telling the truth, even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. Because a foundation built on lies always crumbles, but a foundation built on truth, that weathers any storm." Amika nodded slowly. "I thought being a father meant being the provider, the protector, the man with all the answers. And now? Now I know being a father means being present, even when it's uncomfortable, being real, even when I'm not perfect. These kids," his voice cracked slightly, "aren't mine biologically, but they are mine in every way that matters." "They chose you," Chioma said softly, "and you chose them. That is more powerful than any DNA test." That night, the family gathered for dinner. There was no drama, just normal conversations about homework, weekend plans, small daily annoyances. Adais complained about her math teacher. The middle child showed a design project they had made. The youngest imitated classmates, making everyone laugh. And amidst this wonderfully mundane normality, something small but profound happened. The youngest daughter, without thinking, said, "Papa, can you pass the salt?" Amika passed it, without hesitation, without emotional weight. But Chioma saw. She saw the moment that child, who now knew the full biological truth, still chose that word. "Papa." Amika's eyes met Chioma's across the table, a look that said everything. They had survived. More than that, they had transformed trauma into a foundation. After dinner, when the children had gone to their rooms, Chioma was alone in the kitchen. She looked at photographs on the wall. The family at various moments, birthdays, graduations, small moments. In every photo, love was visible, real. It had nothing to do with genetics. She thought of Pastor Adeyemi, now in prison. He had given sperm. But Amika had given presence, patience, unconditional love on difficult days. There was no comparison. The phone rang. It was Amaka, one of the women from the support group. "Chioma, I wanted to thank you. Today I told my husband the truth, after 8 years of silence, and he stayed. He said we'll work it out together." Chioma smiled, tears streaming down. "See? Truth doesn't destroy what's real. It only exposes what was illusion." "I learned that from you," Amaka said. "You saved me." "No," Chioma replied softly. "You saved yourself. I merely showed you it was possible." When she hung up, Chioma realized something profound. Her pain had purpose. Her trauma had become a beacon, and every woman who now spoke the truth was proof that nothing had been in vain. That night, before sleeping, Chioma wrote in her diary. Something she now did every night. "Dear past self, you believed that protecting the family meant carrying secrets alone. You thought love meant silent sacrifice. You were wrong, and I forgive you for that. Real love doesn't demand silence. It demands courage. The courage to be seen, to be honest, to trust that what is true will survive the truth. Our children are well, not despite the truth, but because of it. And I am finally free. With love, the woman you became." She closed the diary and looked at Emeka, already asleep beside her. This man who had every reason to leave. But he stayed. Not out of obligation, out of choice. And choice, she realized, was the purest form of love. In prison, a few hundred kilometers away, Pastor Adeyemi was alone with his thoughts. He had biologically fathered 13 children, but he knew none of them. He had given life, but he had never given love. And now, in the years that remained to him, he would have to live with that truth. Meanwhile, in a simple house in Lagos, 3 children slept peacefully, knowing who they were, knowing they were chosen, knowing that family wasn't about DNA. It was about who showed up, who stayed, who loved when it was hard. And in that house, love wasn't an empty word. It was daily action. It was painful truth. It was constant choice. That was the real story. Not about a scandal, but about transformation. Not about destruction, but about rebuilding. Not about victims, but about survivors who became revolutionaries. And in Nigeria, where religious power had reigned unquestioned for generations, something had fundamentally changed. Women were speaking. Systems were being questioned. Truth was being demanded. And it all started with one woman who refused to be silent. Chioma had thought she was alone, but her voice had awakened thousands. And now, those voices together were rewriting what it meant to be family, to be a woman, to be powerful, not through violence, not through revenge, but through the most powerful weapon that exists, the truth spoken aloud. And that truth, once liberated, could not be imprisoned again. The Obiora family's story was not about a perfect happy ending. It was about a real new beginning. And sometimes, starting over with truth is more valuable than continuing with illusion. Because in the end, what defines us is not the blood in our veins. It is the love in our choices. And the Obioras had chosen well.